here today. You could be anywhere, you could be doing anything, and the fact that you chose to be here with us today we so appreciate you, because it shows us that you are caring about the lives and the safety of the children of the state of Arizona. And so thank you so much for being here. I would like to just start with rising for to recite the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll have a quick prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. And for our prayer, I'm going to ask my good friend to come forward. Ms. Karen Corden, she is the Executive Director of Camelback Academy, a K-8 charter school. Additionally, her and her husband James are the lead pastors of Camelback Community Church. Please come forward, Karen.
Good morning. Would you all bow your heads and pray with me? Lord Jesus, we just thank you for today. I thank you for every person that is here today who is filling the seats. I thank you that their minds and their hearts, Lord, are just geared toward you and geared toward learning all we can, and to become become more mindful, and become better prepared as citizens and as those who are here to protect and to educate our children. God, I pray that you would take all of our efforts, that you would multiply them as only you can. And Lord, I just thank you for the people that have prepared today, for all of our guest speakers, and I pray that in all things you would use this for your glory. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. All right. What a beautiful way to start. Get our hearts and minds kind of focused on what we're going to do here today. A couple of quick notes, housekeeping notes. Of course, the restrooms, we're all probably going to need to visit those once or twice today. And I know there are a lot of educators in the room. You don't have to raise your hand before you go. You can just go, right? Out the door and to the left in that small hallway is where you'll find the restrooms. Please note where all your exits are. Also, the lunch procedure. Colonel Grossman is going to have several breaks throughout the day to let us stretch our legs and get some refreshments right out front there. There's free coffee and water and tea and that sort of thing. But at lunchtime at noon, we will break. We will head out into the hallway. There will be a lunch buffet set up of whole meat and salads, that sort of thing. Make your plates, come on back in, visit with one another. And so Colonel Grossman will get us started back up right after lunch. And then we do have an end-of-day afternoon speaker, so please stay for the entire day. If you have any questions or concerns or anything, please ask me. If I don't know the answer, I'll find someone who does. So I want to just acknowledge a couple of people who are in the room, a couple of dignitaries. We do have Diane Douglas with us today. Stand just for a minute. Diane is the former superintendent of public instruction. And we so appreciate you being here, because we need people at the upper echelon of education to understand the need for this kind of information and programming. So thank you so much for being here. We have Wendy Rogers in the room. Wendy, where did I find you? There you are. So Wendy is running for office. We must support those of us who are stepping forward to serve in those ways. She's a Republican running for state senate out of Flagstaff. She's also a retired pilot, a lieutenant colonel herself from the Air Force. Thank you so much for being here. And your journey into, holy cow, trying to go into politics. Woo. That's a rough road, and we have to support one another when we have people step forward. I also want to just ask around the room to stand if you're military, former military, so we can recognize you. Thank you for your service. Any first responders, police officers in the room? Double duty there, right? Military and police. I appreciate that. And of course, educators. Do we have educators in the room? to know each other. The tighter our bonds, the better our entire city, or better our entire state. So thank you for that. All right, so I have to, of course, introduce our AZCDL Foundation board members, but I need to, unless she snuck out of the room, Kim Bishop, who greeted you all and checked you in, she really should kind of get to be honorary board member because she worked tirelessly to put all of this together. Kim, are you within earshot? Stand in the door, we can thank you real quick. We'll applaud anyway. There she is. We also have board member Dr. Mark Russell in the room. There, thank you so much. I am the vice president. I'm Cheryl Todd. My husband and I own a small gun shop, azfirearms.com. We have an auction house up in Avondale, Gold Auctions. And he and I co-host a radio show called Gun Freedom Radio. And I have the incredible honor of interviewing a few people actually in this room, and there's a few that I'm already I'm going to be, coming at you to get you signed up on the show. And one of those people that I've interviewed is the president of our foundation, Dave Cox, standing at the camera. So, Dave is the president of two organizations, AZCDL and the AZCDL Foundation. He's an East Coast transplant, so he understands very much why it's so important to do this kind of work in a state where we still have so many freedoms. He is a former computer programmer who is now basically a lobbyist. He's an activist and an advocate for our Second Amendment rights. The AZCDL is where grassroots activists take a stand working at the Arizona legislature to get strong pro-rights bills written and passed into law while stopping bad bills that infringe on our freedoms. Thank you, Dave. The AZCDL Foundation that brought you here today is a 501c3, which was established to promote safety, education, training, practice, and skill at arms, facilitate access to opportunities for education and training regarding firearms, and raise awareness and educate the public on the constitutional and legal aspects of firearm possession, safety, and use. To live out that mission, the AZCDL Foundation endeavors to bring a life-saving and life-protecting campus safety program called Faster Saves Lives to Arizona, and you will hear more about that later today when Faster Director Jim Irvine, who I want to recognize, will speak. And I want him to see every single face in this room still here later today when he speaks at 4, so please stick around. To help us better understand the why Arizona needs the life-saving and life-protecting Faster Saves Lives campus safety program, we are proud to introduce to you our keynote speaker. Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman is a former West Point psychology professor. He is a retired U.S. Army Ranger paratrooper. He is an author and a speaker, and he is the director of Killology Research Group. Colonel Grossman's research has been cited by the President of the United States in a national address. He has testified before the U.S. Senate and U.S. Congress and numerous state legislatures. He has served as an expert witness and consultant in state and federal courts. He helped train mental health professionals after the Jonesboro School Massacre, and he was also involved in counseling and court cases in the aftermath of the Paducah, Springfield, Littleton, and Nickel Mines Amish school massacres. Over the past 19 years, Colonel Grossman has been on the road almost 300 days out of every year because the demand for his expertise as one of our nation's leading trainers for military, law enforcement, mental health providers, and school safety organizations. Please give a warm welcome to our guest, Lieutenant Colonel.
Todd. She is the Wonder Woman of the airways, the golden lion of truth and justice.
Thank you.
Doing good things. Hey, I'm Dave. My background, I'm son of a cop. I'm a cop. My dad started beating Cheyenne, Wyoming, 1962. No academy. Wyatt Earp didn't go to no stinking academy. I want you to think about this, folks. It wasn't until the 1970s we began to send most cops to an academy. For 200 years, we just kind of gave them a badge and cut them loose. Imagine we still do that. It's a theme I want you to wrap your mind around. Every year, better tactics, better technology, better equipment, better training, just to stay where we are. Just barely hanging on. I'm a prior service buck sergeant, paratrooper, Army Ranger, West Point psychology professor, repeat offender author there. And my first book, On Killing, 500,000 copies sold worldwide, translated to 8 languages, Marine Corps Commandant's required reading list, and required reading of peace studies programs in Berkeley. How do you make Berkeley the Marine Corps after the same time? But folks, I want to give you the book in a nutshell because it's an important foundation of where we're going here. People point some horrible crime. Oh, that proves we're all killers. Now, that's an outlier. That's literally one in a million. You explain to me that 99.9% of our citizens who go a lifetime never killed anybody or even seriously attempt to. Divorce, infidelity, layoff, traffic accidents. And less than 1 in 1,000 citizens in a lifetime will even seriously attempt to take a human life. Explain that. Inside most healthy members of our species, there's a pretty hardwired resistance against killing all kind. Sociopaths don't have that resistance. Healthy people have to be trained to kill. We found out in World War II, most of the troops wouldn't pull the trigger. It was a training flaw. Taught to shoot bullseyes. We have no known case of any bullseyes ever attacking our troops. Have you been in the U.S. Armed Forces since the Korean War and never once shot a bullseye? Man-shaped silhouette, popped in field of view, hit the target, target drop, stimulus, response, like a pilot in a flight simulator, like a kid in a fire drill. Modern training makes killing a conditioned response, under authority, to adults. And oh, by the way, the video games are doing the exact same thing to our children. Get a 95 edition of the book, 3 years for Jonesboro, 4 years for Columbine. I predict these juvenile mass murders are coming. We know how to make people able to pull the trigger without resistance, and we know darn well that's happening worldwide. Well, folks, one most important book, and if you're going to get one book today, the one I most want you to have is On Combat, issued in the DEA Academy, issued at the Marshall Academy, also Marine Corps Commandant's required reading, translated to 5 languages, and the nuts and bolts of what's happening in a life and death event. We'll work on this book all afternoon long, and there's some critical items in here. Well, the whole sheep, the wolf, and the sheepdog thing came out of that book. So we did the sheepdog kids book. It's really been well received. But, you know, I speak at the NRA every year. I was just there in Fort Worth this last weekend. I spoke all 3 days at the NRA, you know, and my civilian sheepdogs. They said, Dave, what about all us civilian sheepdogs? So we wrote the book, Why Mommy Carries a Gun. If anybody in the family, mom or dad, grandma, grandpa, going to carry a gun, here's what we want the kids to know. Find a gun, stop, don't touch. Get an adult. 4 universal gun safety laws. Second Amendment. Famous sheepdogs throughout history. It's just a pretty neat book. Well, folks, one of my more recent books is this assassination generation, and we're going to spend the first hour or so working on this book. I gave a copy to the president. I was invited to the White House after the Parkland School Massacre as part of the president's roundtable on violent video games. 2 weeks ago, I gave a copy to the vice president. I was invited to the White House. The vice president deeply interested in this whole media violence dynamic, and I was able to give a copy to him. And I want to start all of this off with a pop quiz. Nobody said to be a test. How many kids killed by school fire in all of America in the last 60 years? Total kids killed, school fire, America, 60 years. Anybody? 0. 61 years ago in Chicago. 61 years ago in Chicago, the last time any American kid was killed by school fire. Well, how many American kids killed by school violence? We got a pretty good DOJ report, tells us in the 97-98 school year, 57 dead by violence in American schools, and 250,000 serious injuries. How many killed by fire that year? 0. Now, you know, if you might as well, Dave, 97, 98 school year, that's year that Joan Bell schoolmaster. I know. I was there on the Joan Bell massacre. We thought it was my son's school we first heard about. By the way, what I call it, the Joan Bell what? Massacre. Please stop calling these horrible mass murder shootings. When the word shooting becomes a term for a criminal act, then we're doomed. It's anti-gun propaganda coming out of your own mouth when we call it a criminal act a shooting. Shooting's not a criminal act. You simply stole the language of us. And what do we call the most horrible mass murders in history? Shooters. Active shooter response. How will we be real busy during deer season? Yeah? Folks, come from the current Department of Justice down, from the grassroots up, there's a major movement that says stop referring to criminal actions as shooting and stop referring to mass murders as shooters. We're in a room full of active shooters, you understand? It's anti-cop, anti-gun propaganda out of your mouth. Every time you call a criminal act a shooting. You ever wonder why the media immediately attacks a cop in a shooting? Because he's a shooter. And we call them shooters, we're terrible people. Folks, the terms define the debate. Do we talk illegal alien or undocumented immigrant? Do we talk pro-abortion or pro-choice? And we have given a victory by using this terminology. And the best response is mockery and laughter. Anytime you hear the phrase active shooter response, mock them, laugh at them, then we're real busy during deer season. Yeah. But folks, we want to blame the object and not the individual. That phrase, we don't call it murder, we call it shooting, and we blame the object and not the individual. So yeah, I was there at the Joan Bell massacre. Hey, you know, what if the perp has knives? Kid in Pennsylvania slapped 21 people with knives. Oh, that trained back shooter, he's got knives. What if the kid has firebombs? Kid in Colorado, running down the hallway, throwing Molotov cocktails. Oh, I was a active shooter, he's got firebombs. I'm told. We actually had a teacher say in a real-world incident, he wasn't shooting, he's not an active shooter. I wasn't sure if the training applied. That'd be an English teacher, yeah? And folks, there's case after case where we stop him before he fires a shot. Active intruder, active assailant, but do not call criminal shooters. It is not a criminal act. It is anti-cop, anti-gun propaganda coming out of your mouth. So yeah, let's turn that out the Joan Bell massacre. Massacre, there's a good old word. How many of y'all remember the Boston Massacre? One thing that set up in Revolution, 5 dead in the Boston Massacre. Remember St. Valentine's Day Massacre, mobsters murder 7 mobsters outside Chicago. Add them up. Add up Boston Massacre, St. Valentine's Day Massacre, you still got more dead at Columbine. Double that number, you still got more dead at Sandy Hook or Virginia Tech. Why can't we call these lands what they are? Massacres. But they want to blame it on the individual, and there's more than that involved. We'll talk about it. So yeah, the 97-98 school year, that was a bad year. But in the 06-07 school year, we had a new record dead by violence. 63 dead by violence in the school. How many killed by fire that year? 0. And folks, the year the Parkland School Massacre, 17 in Parkland, 10 in Santa Fe, Texas, 2s and 3s across America, that year was a new record dead by violence. Every couple of years we rack up a new body count dead by violence in the school. And meanwhile, not a single kid been killed by school fire. So y'all help me say anything. What kind of grade do we get the firefighter for keeping a kid safe from fire? Go on, you get the firefighter. Yeah, even the cops reluctantly. My cops reluctantly give the firefighter an A. You don't understand, folks. My cops always mumble, dang firefighters. Yeah. They sleep till they're hungry and eat till they're tired. Repeat as necessary. They walk in the door and they get an A. So what do we get for keeping our kids safe from violence? What's the violence grade? Nobody gets an F anymore. How about needs improvement? Can we all agree, little Johnny in this room and say, Johnny, why can't you be like little Jimmy firefighter? These are a student denial. Look up the ceiling. Look at the fire sprinklers up there. White dust. And the ceiling material up there is code selected because fireproof material. You spot the smoke alarms up there? And drop down to the old fire exit signs out. That ain't just any fire sign. There's a battery backup when the world ends. It'll still be lit fire exit sign. Yeah. And yeah, there's wood veneer paneling on this stuff. You bet your bottom dollar's been treated with fire retardant material. And the wall boards are constructed fireproof, fire retardant material. The concrete slab underneath your feet, the carpet on top of the seat when you're sitting on the table in front of you are code selected because they're fireproof, fire retardant material. Folks, the cost of a modern building is double to meet fire code, easily. Fire sprinkler system under pressure for the lifetime of the building, one of the most expensive things in this building. Electrical system under fire code. Double the electrical system, one wiring every fire exit, every fire line. Fireproof material for the structure of the building, interior furnishings versus cheapest alternative. We're not even counting the separate network of wiring that goes from every fire line straight to the fire line. We're not counting that huge system of pipes and fire hydrants that run through our civilization. We're not even counting those. Half the cost of a modern building goes on fire truck. Well, what do we want to do for violence? Denial. Denial. You know, folks, we do church safety. Before 9 people murdered in Charleston Church, before 26 people murdered and we've been doing house of worship. More people are murdered in houses of worship every year than schools. Every year, without fail. More dead in houses of worship. And people say, well, won't you think God will protect you? Won't God protect you from fire? Why do you have that fire exit sign? Show us your faith. Throw away that fire extinguisher. Throw away that fire exit sign. Show us your faith. That's not how it works. God gave you the tools and the brains to use them. And when bad things happen because you don't use the tool, don't blame God. You understand? And so, folks, we got to prepare for violence like the firefighter prepares for fire. And banning fire extinguishers does not prepare for fire. Do you understand? We need the tools to be able to confront the people doing this bad stuff. And I want you to really wrap your mind around just how bad the situation is. There has never been a multiple homicide by a juvenile in the school in human history until 1975 in Brampton, Canada. Now, this is a very specific subset. Multiple homicide by a juvenile in the school has never happened in human history until 1975. A double homicide by a juvenile in the school in Canada. First one was in Canada. You know, the vice president locked right on to one of the lines from the book. I said 5,000 years of recorded history. 500 years of gunpowder combat. 150 years of repeated firearms. And not one single time in the history of the world has any child committed a multiple homicide in their school. And now they're everywhere. Double homicide in Canada, 75, and then a double homicide in the school by a juvenile in San Diego, female. In the 1970s, for the first time in human history, we had 2 double homicides by a juvenile in the school, one in Canada, one in America. In the 1980s, we had 2 double homicides by a juvenile in the school, one in Finland, one in America. In the 1990s, began to explode. Moses Lake, Washington, Bethel, Alaska, Pearl, Mississippi, Paducah, Kentucky, my hometown of Jonesboro, Arkansas. 21 years ago, Jonesboro, 2 little boys, 11 and 13 years old, stole a van. They could barely look over the dashboard. They could barely reach the pedals. These are little kids, 11 and 13 years old, stole a van, drove across town, broke into a law enforcement officer's house. They stole the hunting rifles in hand. They drove back across town. They put themselves in a kill position overlooking the playground. The 11-year-old boy pops in the back door and pulls a firearm. Stop, stop, stop. What are you doing? Popped in the back door. If the door had been locked, the crime as it played out would not have been possible. Step 1 of keeping our kids safe, keep the stinking doors locked. Single point of entry, control who walks in your building. 20 years after the Jonesboro massacre, Parkland, Florida, 20 years almost to the week, the official federal report, why were all the doors wide open? 20 years after Jonesboro, the simplest damn thing, keep the stinking doors locked, is too hard. Why was he able to pop in the back door? And then 3 of their personnel were reprimanded. 3 school people were reprimanded for not calling in a lockdown drill. They saw the kid go in the door with a rifle and they failed to call in a lockdown drill. I'll tell you why it happened, folks. Because people said it'll never happen here. Oh, it'll never happen here. You ever hear those words? It'll never happen here. Put your back to the wall, get a good firm grip on your gun. Because that's why it happens. And everybody says, oh, that can't possibly be right. It'll never happen here. We don't need to keep the doors locked. It'll never happen here. Imagine if somebody said fire will never happen here. We don't need a fire sprinkler system. Shut off the water. It'll never happen here. We don't need a fire exit. It'll never happen here. We would never say that. And yet violence is actually more likely to harm people than fire. And I want you to understand, Here we are, 20 years later, and the least damn thing to keep our kids safe is too hard. And then they got to point the finger somewhere else. They got blood on their hands, they're negligent, and they got to point the finger somewhere else. And then we got a deputy that didn't go in. Not just civil charges, but criminal charges. 2 other deputies recently that were fired because they ran in the other direction. And a perimeter that didn't go in. I would have told you American cops will never get inside the perimeter while children die. It would have been wrong. Now, folks, the captain in charge of perimeter, this is a leadership failure by the sheriff. The sheriff was fired, he faces civil liability, and he should be in jail. The sheriff is one of those people who said, never use that evil word warrior. We want guardians. He sucked the warrior spirit out of them, and he got exactly what he asked for. They sat on the perimeter and they guarded the school. 2 of them ran away and guarded the junior high. And the perimeter sat and guarded. 3 times the medics begged them to let them in. 3 times. They said, kids are bleeding out, kids are dying in there, let us in. We'll accept the risk. And the captain in charge of perimeter had been promoted because she's good with people, right? I don't know what to do, I'll have to check. And so the sheriff has blood on his hands. At every level he failed. The school has blood on their hands. So what do? They gotta point the finger somewhere else. Oh, it's all about the guns. Their negligence, their criminal negligence, their failure. Oh, it's all about the gun. The kids are children. They don't have wisdom because they're children. They have vulnerability and gullibility. And their superintendent says about the guns, the sheriff says about the guns. Oh, it's all about the guns. And the blood on their hands and the abject leadership failure is completely swept under the rug. The whole gun business is about pointing the finger somewhere else, you understand? But folks, in Jonesboro, Arkansas, 21 years ago, 2 little boys pulled the fire line, sucked into the kill zone, and mercilessly, viciously gunned down 13 kids and 2 teachers. Ultimately, 5 would die. The all-time record juvenile massacre in human history. Not just a record juvenile massacre in the school, the all-time record juvenile massacre, period, for 1 year. What happened a year later? The Columbine massacre. The Columbine killers murdered 13 between them, call it 6.5 each. You say, well, just a couple years later, in Erfurt, Germany, a 19-year-old high school dropout comes to the school, murders 17 people. Wait a minute. That's the exact same crime as Parkland. Erfurt, Germany, 19-year-old high school dropout comes to school, murders 17 people. Anybody see that in the news? A crime identical to Parkland happened in Erfurt, Germany. 19-year-old high school dropout comes to school, murders 17. Why wasn't that in the news? Because they have this blood on their hands, and they got to point the finger somewhere else. And folks, here's the big lie. Here's the media's big lie. The commercials are worth billions of dollars because they influence our behavior. What's in between the commercials has no impact on our children. They will accept absolutely no responsibility. A 30-second commercial will modify the behavior of millions of people. Decade after decade of sick, twisted, perverted TV shows and movies, and especially the video games. And their lie is it has no impact on our children. This is the most blatant, obvious lie you could ever point your finger at. But they gotta point the finger somewhere else. So the Erfurt massacre, they just simply censor it. They won't talk about it. But the Parkland killer, the Erfurt killer, they were both 19 years old. They don't qualify for our juvenile hit rate. So the all-time record juvenile massacre in human history, 2009, Finland, Germany, a 17-year-old high school student murders 15 all by himself. The all-time record juvenile massacre in human history, Germany. A crime identical to Parkland, Germany. How many saw that in the news? Oh, why not? Oh, because it's only happened in America. It's because of our guns. And that's the big lie, folks. They got to point the finger somewhere else. They have this blood on their hands and they simply sense the information. Folks, how many of them been to Germany? Tell me they can't regulate things. Tell me they can't control things. Some of the strictest gun laws in Europe are the most administratively minded people on the planet, and they couldn't make it work. Folks, Finland's had 3 juvenile mass murders in the school. There was one in Taiwan, there was one in Thailand, there was one in Moscow. Russia is a totalitarian nation that has tried to confiscate every gun for 100 years. And Russia couldn't stop a juvenile from getting a gun and coming to school committing mobile homicide. It's not about what's in their hand. It's about what's in their head. And it's worldwide. Where the pits of hell are these kids coming from? It's never happened in human history, and now it's everywhere. We know damn well where they're coming from. Just a year ago, in USA Today, study confirms link between violent video games and physical aggression. Duh! 1,000 sound scholarly studies, the AMA, the APA, the Attorney General, the Surgeon General, every psychiatric, psychological, pediatric medical group on the planet, it's all in the books, making definitive statements. And then when the bad stuff comes out, then they simply lie. But the one thing these fellows all have in common, folks, Dr. Jim McVeigh, FBI consultant, definitive study of 19 school killers. No, they weren't all on Ritalin, that's an urban myth. No, they were all on Prozac, that's a lie. The one thing the killers all had in common, they dropped out of life and they immersed themselves in the sickest movies and the sickest video games. The Columbine killers watched the movie Natural Born Killers over 50 times. Folks, prior to the 1980s, it was not possible to watch a movie 50 times. How many of y'all remember Betamax and VHS and the Big Bell? Remember that? You remember that? You're aging yourself. There's a generation out there that doesn't understand. If a movie wasn't on TV, if it wasn't a theater, you couldn't watch it. It was not possible to watch a sick movie 50 times. Folks, now Columbine killers rehearsed their massacre on the video game Doom. They filled rooms in the murder simulator full of people who couldn't shoot back and they rehearsed the massacre. Prior to that point in history, it was not possible. Now, folks, look. People say, I played all those games, I'm not a killer. A lot of people smoke and never die of cancer. When I was a kid, I never buckled my seatbelt. I'm just fine. Every kid I know, none of us buckled a seatbelt, we're all just fine. Not every kid with a seatbelt unbuckled died. Most of the ones that died had their seatbelt unbuckled. Not every kid that plays these games becomes a killer. Most of them become vicious little bullies who take pleasure from human death and suffering. But all the killers played these games. This is the new factor, folks. And they desperately have to point the finger somewhere else. And so, Phil Chalmers wrote a book, Inside the Mind of the Teen Killer. I recommend it very highly. I've been talking juvenile mass murder in school. Phil is talking all teen killers. He's interviewed hundreds of them. He's corresponded with hundreds of them. He's got a chapter in the book, How to Create a Teen Killer in 10 Easy Steps. All the old problems are still there. All the old problems are still important. There's one new factor every single time. Every one of these kids he's ever interviewed is obsessed with the sickest movies and TVs and video games and the sickest culture the woods have ever seen. Phil says, oh, you cops out there, don't ask a little killer you're inspired by a movie, it makes them mad. You cops, you strike up a conversation with this little killer. So, hey man, like, what's your favorite TV show? I watch Breaking Bad and Sons of Anarchy and Sopranos over and over again. Yeah. Well, what's your favorite movie? I watch Natural Born Killers over 50 times. Well, what's your favorite video game? I play Grand Theft Auto 5 until 4 o'clock in the morning, month after month. Phil says you ask any one of these killers 3 questions. Favorite TV show, favorite movie, favorite video game. Boom, you're right inside their sick little world every single time. And so, folks, this is a new factor. And here's the El Paso Walmart murder. Remember the El Paso killer? This is right out of his stinking manifesto. Don't attack heavily guarded places. Number one, they're not coming when people can shoot back. And to fulfill your super soldier Call of Duty freaking video game fantasy. In his manifesto, he said he's fulfilling his Call of Duty video game fantasy. He said what he's doing. He's taken his fantasy and turned it into your stinking reality. I showed this to the vice president. He said, I never heard about that. How come I didn't hear about this? Folks, they simply censor the information. And folks, here's the Parkland killer. The Miami Herald quotes the Parkland neighbor, the Parkland killer. The neighbor says he played violent video games 12, 15 hours a day. It was kill, something up, kill, some more, all day long. The all-consuming, all-pervasive thing in this killer's life were the video games. 15 hours a day. How many saw that in the news? This kid spent every minute of every day playing the violent video games. Why wasn't that in the news? They have got to point the finger somewhere else. And so, folks, last October, less than a year ago in Russia had their own Virginia Tech. a college massacre in Russia. 20 murdered and more than 50 wounded in a college in Russia. And we saw that in the news. Why in the hell was that not headline news? They had their own stinking Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech was news around the planet. Those crazy Americans are out of control with their guns, and it happens in Russia. And they simply said, Google it, Russia, school massacre, 20 dead. And folks, we had an AP article, China's had knife massacres in their kindergartens and daycares. And they was coming up, folks, any day now, we're gonna see a daycare massacre. China's had repeated daycare massacres. Axes, hatchets, knives, swords, hammers. Like out with a hammer in a daycare in China, hammer the little skulls in one by one. And so, folks, Belgium had a daycare massacre. 2009, Belgium, look this up. On the first anniversary of the death of the actor who played the Joker, the tragic death, the young actor who played the Joker, with orange hair and a butcher knife. This guy comes to a daycare center in Belgium, knocks on the front door, and quotes a line from the movie. I have one question. That was the Joker's line when he crashed Harvey Dent's party in the movie. I have one question. Where's Harvey Dent? His children would do, and the Joker murders Harvey Dent's children. But connect the dots here. First anniversary of the death of the actor who played the Joker, orange hair and a butcher knife, quoting a line from the movie. Daycare center in Belgium. He murders one daycare worker, wounds another, one survived. That's why we notice at the front door, and hacks and stabs 12 little babies in the crib. But folks, when God forbid, when that daycare massacre happens in America, they'll pretend it never happened anywhere on the planet. And it's all because of the gun. But you can do the same thing with a hammer in a daycare in China, hammer the little skulls in one by one. It's not about what's in their hand. It's about what's in their head. So China just had a knife massacre in the school. And the AP Wire article actually picked it up. This is great. The AP Wire article, they picked this up. They talked about it. Let's look at what they had to say. It said, an attacker killed 8 students and injured 2 others. How? Did he poison their food? Did he shoot them? How did he do it? With a knife. That word is not even mentioned. They don't say how. And they also said, here they are. Last April, 9 were killed and more than a dozen injured in a middle school. You know why the guy gave them a middle school? Because China's turned their daycares and elementary schools into fortresses. No problem. He went to the middle school with a knife. But how did that die? Anybody see it? How did it happen? They simply censor it. You assume it had to be a gun massacre, right? Or maybe poison them. You don't need a gun. You don't need to poison them. You walk in the door with a butcher knife and cut the throats of these children one by one. And who's going to stop you? Nobody there can shoot back. Nobody there can protect those children. And so, folks, I co-authored a book with Glenn Beck. He's a heck of a good guy in person. He's contacted me and asked me to co-author the book. Great guy. I think I wrote more of the book than he did. It gets his name on the front. That's how. But this was a New York Times bestseller list. New York Times bestseller list. Not one single review. Think about that. You can attack a New York Times bestseller. You can promote it. What you cannot do is simply refuse to talk about it. The censorship is enraging. But folks, every gun owner should have a copy to give one away with every gun you sell. My son and I started a gun business. We'll tell you more about it later on, but we got a great, we bought the last of the Daytonics 45, 70 slides and frames, and lovingly master handcrafted, and we got a copy of this book with every one of it. And we believe it should be done. But folks, the first third of the book say the guns are not new. Oh, what about those high-capacity military weapons? M1 carbines, 20, 30-round magazines, semi-automatic military weapons. Why would anybody have the right to carry one of those? Thousands of them flooded America in World War II. Thousands. You could buy M1 carbines for $20 a pop. How many M1s would you buy for $20? The guns didn't change. Oh, high-capacity double-stack 9mm pistols. What about a Browning high power? Came out in 1935. The official firearm of many nations in World War II. Thousands of them flooded America. The guns didn't change. We changed. Our children changed. Up until 1968, any kid in America could order a gun from Montgomery Ward's catalog and the U.S. mail would deliver it to their house. The guns didn't change, folks. We changed, our children changed. And that's what they desperately do not want you to be thinking about. They want to continue to sell this stuff to our children. And they simply censor the news. They're just another corporation that will censor any information that gets in the way of making money. But now there's a critical component I need you to work into the equation. It's absolutely essential you wrap your mind around this. Medical technology is holding down the murder rate. Yeah. Look, if we had World War II level technology, medical technology in Iraq, we'd have 10 times many dead American troops. And the same thing is true in our streets. If we had Vietnam level medical technology in Afghanistan, we'd have at least 4 times many dead American troops, and the same thing is true in our streets. This is huge. You gotta wrap your mind around this. A major U.S. Harvard study, peer-reviewed journal, irrefutable data. If we had 1970s medical technology, the murder rate would be at least 4 times greater. I say at least because this data is 20 years old. The leaps and bounds of life-saving technology the last 20 years is astounding. Well, folks, you all heard the phrase inflation-adjusted dollars. When we talk about money over a period of time, we're lying if we don't adjust for inflation. And we say he made 50 cents an hour. In today's money, that would be like $12 an hour. We're lying if we don't do it. We say 500 people murdered in Chicago. We're lying if we don't say there would be at least 2,000 with 1970 technology. And this data is 20 years old. Tourniquets alone, may have cut the murder rate in half recently. Every cop carries a tourniquet. Slap on a tourniquet, you've prevented a murder. The leaps and bounds of technology coming out of the battlefield in the last decade alone could have cut it in half again. Does that not common sense? Is that not automatically obvious? So folks, I teach cops in all 50 states. I train every federal agency. I train our tier ones back up. I'm a school safety trainer across America. I also have spoken in over 100 universities and colleges. I'm their guest criminal justice presenter, the CJ program, criminal justice. They have a CJ day. They bring all the alumni in and all the faculty and all the students, turn me loose for a day. I tell them the field of criminal justice is fundamentally flawed. We talk about the number of dead people. We're like talking about money without allowing for inflation. It's a lie. Everything we say about violence, we measure by the murder rate, and it's a lie. Now, with that said, folks, let's take a look at the number of people murdered. Now, folks, in 2006, right on the Uniform Crime Report, UCR, we had 17,000 Americans murdered. By 2008, 16,000. 2009, 15,000. 2010, 14,000. This is the leaps and bounds of technology coming out of the battlefield saving lives. And then, in 2015, 2016, the murder rate exploded like nothing we have seen in the history of our nation. How many saw that in the news? Folks, I had the American Sheriff's Association. I had hundreds of sheriffs a couple of months ago. I said, Sheriff, how many of you knew about this? Not one. If this had been the stock market, we'd hear about it every day. If it was the interest rates or inflation rates, we'd be hearing about it at least once a month. How in the hell could this have happened for 2 years straight? And then it stayed there. It stayed up there. That's as scary as being there. How in the hell could this have happened and not be in the freaking news? But folks, the one place I can find them talking about it, here's what they said. The murder is up, but it's still below historical highs. You lying scum-sucking dogs. Now, folks, if we allow for technology, and we're very conservative, here was the 1970s. This is our starting point. And by 2000, the number's somewhere between 3 and 4 times what it was. And the intermediate point where it's 1.5 times, and it actually looks something. And then in these last couple of months, it's up here. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. And it's not even the damn news. Their message is there is no boogeyman, there is no bad man. You don't need a gun, you just hurt yourself. And we don't have a problem with crime, it's out of control cops. Our problem is out of control cops. You don't need a gun, you would just hurt yourself. There's no boogeyman, there is no bad man. Folks, I believe this is the single greatest failure of the media and I can find in history to absolutely refuse to report any of this data. It should be like the interest rates and inflation rates, at least monthly. But folks, why did it cut loose during those 2 years? We've been building up to this. Folks, we've been building up to this. I said for years, the kids who gave us Jonesboro, the middle school, call them on the high school, give us college massacres. I've been saying for years, college massacres coming. Virginia Tech, NIU, Louisiana Boat Tech, half a dozen colleges in California. Come on, was Virginia Tech that hard to predict? They gave us hell in the middle school in Jonesboro, the high school in Columbine. Of course, they're going to give us college massacres. And folks, the FBI says these mass murders are doubling every decade, the wrong number, and the average body count's going up. The Las Vegas massacre, the Mandalay Bay massacre. Remember the Mandalay Bay massacre? This is that generation growing up and giving us pure hell as adults. And folks, for years I said we're going to see elementary massacres. And then we had Sandy Hook Elementary School, and we knew Darnwell was coming. I'll tell you what next, daycare massacres, school bus massacres, we'll talk more about that. And somebody's going to plow through those kids in front of the school with a vehicle 100 miles an hour. I prepared my computer, I know what that means, a vehicle. It's in the news every day. Vehicles as weapons of mass murder. Look where the kids are and move them so that they're not a target. If you were going to plow through those kids with a vehicle, what would you take? Move those kids, put out the bollards, prepare now. Don't wait for somebody plowing through our kids and then steps out and finish off the survivors. So folks, just understand, why did it cut loose now? Well, the FBI guys who put this data together, they call it the Ferguson Effect. They say we've created a sense of anger in our criminals. Like somehow the cop's the bad guy for enforcing the law. Look, maybe I lost it. I'm 63 years old, turned out old geezer. I always thought if you're a criminal, you live your life in fear. You're a criminal. You should be paranoid. The world really is out to get you. Now we say, oh, the cops are the bad guys. And the criminals are misunderstood. They've been watching their own damn shows too much. Breaking Bad and Sopranos and Sons of Anarchy, where the criminals are the heroes and the cops are the bad guys. And so, folks, this Ferguson Effect, this is bad juju. And then we have sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. When the government tells people to not obey the law, very bad things happen. Maybe they're doing the right thing, faced with a moral dilemma. You pay a price when the government tells you to not obey the law. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, crime is contagious. If the government becomes a lawbreaker, if the government tells you to disobey the law, it breeds contempt for law. It invites every man to call on himself, it invites anarchy. That's what you're looking at. Anarchy, contempt for law, the breakdown of our civilization. And it's coming unglued. And folks, one more thing, looking at the domestic side of the house. Every year, cops have better tactics, better training, better body armor. The number of dead cops over any period of time completely underrepresents the situation. I tell you that because I need you to understand that 2016 was the single worst year-over-year increase in cops murdered in the history of our nation. Remember 5 dead cops in Dallas, 4 dead cops in Baton Rouge? And everywhere you see a multiple homicide of cops, I will show you many, many where they tried and failed. The single worst year-over-year increase in cops murdered in the history of our nation. Gang crime and gang membership has exploded. 2 years straight, the homicide rate exploded like nothing we've seen, and the criminals believe they're the good guys and the cops are the bad guys. More about that later, but understand, it is worldwide. Folks, go to Wikipedia, look up the murder rates worldwide. Just look up murder rates. And folks, click on the rate button. Click on the rate button, and then click it again to get the most violent nations on top. And the 10 most violent nations on the planet. El Salvador, Honduras, Venezuela, Jamaica. You could not pay me enough money to take my family on vacation to Jamaica. It's always in the top 10, year after year. As you go to Jamaica, you stay in the resort. It's a holy war zone. But the top 10, South Africa has limited gun rights. But the top 10 have gun control. Disarm citizens. Anywhere in the world you disarm citizens, you empower criminals. But you know that we've been at war, that Mexico's at war with the cartels. And Mexico's war with the cartels, there's more loss of life than Iraq and Afghanistan put together. Mexico going to make the top 10. The only other nation with limited gun rights is Brazil, in the top 20. Mexico is number 21. Iraq is number 52. Afghanistan number 82. I would rather take my family on vacation to Iraq than Mexico. And this is new. And we all remember a time you walked across the border to Mexico, had a nice meal, did a little shopping. Ain't nobody walking over the border for meal and shopping no more. Mexico's a howling war zone. But other nations are so bad, they're fleeing to Mexico by the millions. And they're coming across our border like a freight train. Latin America is a howling war zone. Has come across our border like a freight train. Well, what do you know about this? It's the murder rate. What do we know about the murder rate? It underrepresents the situation. Folks, even in these nations, technology is saving lives. Anywhere in the world, cell phones appear, the murder rate takes a dip. Cell phones appear, the murder rate takes a dip. Why? Automatic notification to the ambulance. Get them at that golden hour. Save those lives. Tourniquets. Folks, my favorite tourniquet is the SWAT team. Go to Amazon.com and order a dozen. Put it in your coat pocket. Put it everywhere. The military tourniquets won't work for small children. This is a third the price, a third the cost, a third the size, and completely intuitive. That fast, you shut down the arm. Put it in your teeth, use two hands, shut down the leg. But around the world, they're making these out of bicycle inner tubes and saving lives. Tourniquets are saving lives in those nations right now. The number of dead people in those nations underrepresent the situation. Now, folks, a better measure of the problem would be the rate at which people try to kill each other off. Now, best would be some kind of a medically adjusted murder rate. You understand? That would be our best bet. But the rate at which people are trying to kill each other off is a significantly better resource. And Interpol collected that data. Interpol collected the data, started in 1977, and violent crime doubles, triples, quadruples, quintuples per capita, nation after nation. Watch my data stop in 03. Why don't I update this slide? Anybody want to guess? They stopped reporting the data. Go to the Interpol website, look up their biannual crime report. They stopped reporting the data because the nation did not want people comparing between nations. I guarantee you, if it were better, they'd be saying so. What's the new factor in all these nations? Double, triple, quadruple, quintuple violent crime. And what's the new factor in all these nations? By the way, folks, just going back to this one, yeah, America's number 94 out of 230. Israel's 167. Switzerland, one of the armies of the planet, is 211 out of 230 nations. All those hyper-violent nations have gun control. The nations with the most armed nations have some of the lowest homicide rates worldwide. Do you understand? How many of y'all saw that in the news? Yeah. But folks, violent crime doubles, triples, quadruples. No idea how bad it's been for the last decade and a half. They won't tell us. But I guarantee you, better they'd be saying so. So what's one new factor in all these nations? What's the new factor in all these nations? What's the new factor in America? What is the one new factor in every one of those nations? Some have gun control, some have death penalty, some don't. Some have immigration, some have racial tensions, some have population density, some don't. Some have parent schools, some have abortion, some don't. I'm not saying these things aren't important, they're all important. Whatever your pet topic is, I will show you a nation that has it. I will show you a nation that doesn't have it. And they both have a doubling, tripling, quadrupling violent crime. What's the one new factor? We're these nations. The sick movies and the sick TV shows, and especially the sick video games, are creating sick children. Read the book. Every medical, psychiatric, psychological group on the planet is talking about this. So folks, we're going to wrap up this first hour now. I'm an old soldier, like play like my old soldier rules. For me, that means a 10-minute break every hour in the hour. The research is clear. Once you sit in your tail for an hour, learning just goes away. Yeah? We're going to go for an hour, 10-minute break, hour, 10-minute break, and we'll have lunch about noonish, and then we'll wrap lunch up probably a little bit early, and then again, an hour, 10-minute break, and we'll keep that cycle going, folks. Do you have a feeling for just how bad this situation is? Latin America's howling war zone coming across the border like a freight train. The single worst year-over-year increase in cops murdered in the history of that nation. But Folks, 2 years straight, the homicide rate exploded like nothing we have seen in modern history. It's bad. It's very bad. But y'all want to hear some good news? The world desperately needs what you have to give. You must believe in who you are. And what you bring to the table is armed American citizens holding back beside our violence. The world desperately needs what you have to give. Your sacrifice is for a noble and worthy purpose. Ain't nobody doing this to make great big gobs of money. You carry a gun, you seek that training, you use your own resources to protect your loved ones. And you must believe your sacrifice is for a noble and worthy purpose. And the world desperately needs what you have to give. Waiting at home for me is my bride of 44 years, my high school sweetheart. I was still 17, and she was 15 when I proposed to her. We are from Arkansas. 2 years later, she married a crazy Army paratrooper. She's been in this ride with me for 44 years. I love her more than life itself. After 24 years in the Army, 22 years ago I retired. I've been on the road doing this 200 to 300 days a year for 22 years. I get home one, maybe 2 nights a week. Conjugal visit, clean underwear, back in the You see, the only one on earth more precious than my bride are our grandchildren. And we believe if we love our children, if we love our grandchildren, if we love our nation, if we love our God, we believe we'll walk out that door and give 100%. I'm 63 years old. I've been doing this for 22 years, and my primary prayer is I can do it for another 20 years. Every day that I have the help, every day the world wants what I got to give, I will be out there. And with all my heart and soul, I implore you to have that sense of urgency. As we love our children, as we love our grandchildren, as we love our nation, as we love our God, walk out that door and give 100%. This is the single most important factor in the equation. I am a one-issue voter. Am I a child that can't be trusted? Then give up on the very idea of democracy, a representative republic. Am I a free citizen who can be given the right to protect my loved ones? Anywhere on the planet, if you're a politician, if you're rich, you have armed security. Peons and peasants will never have that. My family's life is every bit as valuable as the president, and I am my family's Secret Service. And I will fight with all my heart and all my might for that one issue. Am I a peon, a peasant who can't be trusted? Or am I a citizen who can be entrusted with a tool to protect my loved ones? But you must believe how desperately important it is. Our civilization hangs on that one issue. Our way of life, our ability to protect ourselves and sustain ourselves hangs on that one issue. But please have that sense of urgency. Dedicate yourself with all your heart and all your mind and all your spirit to keeping our nation free and protecting those that we love. And so, folks, here's the plan now. Mickey's big hand is on the one. We're going to have a 10-minute break, and please, that's your ability. Come be back in here. We'll get a good rhythm going. We'll go to the break, Harry. We take credit card, debit card, cash, checks, food stamps, green stamps, Bitcoins. We pick them all. Here's the final point now. If you're a civilian, back to your seats at quarter past the hour. Perhaps you're military, back to the seats at 10, 15 hours. If you're a Marine or from Arkansas, Mickey's big hand will be on the 3.